Hey friends, I've got a big video for you today all about fountain pens. And this is going to be a few things. It's going to be kind of a brag on my collection, and it's also going to be a primer for those of you who are interested in getting into fountain pens, because this can be a really intimidating hobby. And it's also going to be a demo. I'm going to show you the process of cleaning and refilling a pen as well. So it's a little bit of everything. And I just want to kind of give a disclaimer that I'm coming at this from a mixed media angle, from the perspective of sketching with these pens. My criteria for what I like and what works for me is not the same as maybe a fountain pen critic on a website somewhere, so just keep that in mind. But that being said, if I say something mean about your favorite pen, then by all means, please set the record straight. Leave me a comment, a nice comment, but you know, just let me know if I got something wrong or I'm doing something wrong, because I'm completely self-taught as well and just want to share the knowledge that I have collected over the past several years with someone who may just be getting started. Also, I apologize, I'm getting over a cold and my voice is pretty rough right now, but we're going to get started, and we're going to start on the cheap end of the spectrum. So these are manuscript Dodeck fountain pens, and I rave about these in my workshop, which is called Mindful Metamorphoses, because we start with drawing with fountain pens. These are extremely inexpensive, extremely affordable. They are $4 before a coupon, and they're quality little pens. They take a standard cartridge, which is great. They have a screw-off cap, which can be kind of annoying if you're in the art flow and you want to do something really fast. It can be hard to get that screw-off cap off quickly. But the thing that I love most about these is that the nib is extremely responsive, extremely thin, and it actually feels sometimes like I'm drawing with a dip pen, like an old-fashioned quill. So these are great little pens and a wonderful place to start when you're just getting into fountain pens for the first time. So that is the manuscript Dodeck. I've seen them in 3 different barrel colors, so you have some choices. They come with cartridges. They don't come with converters, and I'll talk in a little bit about what that means. Then we're getting to the ones that I have, as you can see, the most of. These are the Jane Davenport Incredible pen, Incredible with a K, and these are super great pens. They're so high quality for the price. They are readily available at Michael's, and they're usually, I think, $8 before the coupon. Again, always remember to use your coupon. But very high quality. I forgot to open up the Dodeck, so I'm going to do that, and then I'll open up the Jane Davenport, and you'll see they're pretty much the same. But I have converters in all of these. I'll talk about that some more in a minute. And this one has Noodler's Apache Sunset ink in it. That one had a converter that I bought separately, because like I said, the Dodeck doesn't come with converters. This is the converter that comes with the Jane Davenport pen. So that's what those look like when you crack them open. They've got a gold colored nib. And the nib is much stiffer than the Dodeck. Almost every nib is stiffer than the Dodeck. But it's very, very smooth. And out of all of these Jane Davenport pens that I've bought, I have only had one that drew or wrote roughly on paper that I wasn't satisfied with. So just really great quality all around and great consistency. And like I said, readily available. And they come with a converter and with 3 cartridges. So wonderful value. Those are the Jane Davenports. Next we have the pens that I don't have more than one of, that I don't feel like I need more than one of. I have owned more than one of this kind of pen in the past. This is a Schaeffer fountain pen. I have no idea what the model is, but I know that you used to be able to get these pretty easily in office supply stores. They were really popular. This is also a very narrow nib. Let's see how readily it writes, because it's running out of ink a little bit. I don't endorse shaking your fountain pen. Sometimes you just do what you gotta do. Yeah, it's not coming out. But it does have a nice narrow nib. It really got me into narrow nibs. Schaeffer does not take standard fountain pen cartridges, so keep that in mind. But they are pretty easy to find still in various office supply stores. And yeah, that's getting pretty low. So I probably paid $10 for this one originally. And that's still a reliable price point for starter Schaeffer pens. But I've had this for years. It's always been my favorite pen for just everyday writing, and I use it occasionally in my art, not as often as I use the Dodex and the Davenports, just because it doesn't have the universal standard cartridge. Next we have another Schaeffer. This one's a Twistoff cap. And this is actually a vintage pen that I bought at an art supply store. And let's see if there's any ink left in there. Not right now. Not the best demonstration when all my pens are running out of ink, but we'll fix that soon. This is a bladder style pen. So inside this opaque body, there is a soft reservoir, a flexible reservoir, that you use this pressure bar to empty first, and then you fill it back up with ink. So usually you can rely on the idea that if you're getting a vintage fountain pen that's really, really vintage, it's probably going to be bladder style. It's really fun to use that style, and I really like the size of this pen, the size of the nib, the weight of it, the feel of the barrel. It feels kind of like Bakelite. It feels pretty old. It does have the previous owner's tooth marks on it, which are a little weird. They chewed this pretty bad. The only downside is that this pen did leak on me while I was in a staff meeting at work one day, so that wasn't so cool. But I haven't taken it out much since then. I felt personally betrayed. Fountain pens leak sometimes. But that's just an example of what the bladder style is like. This pen is a Lucille LE8226 that I picked up at one of those stores that's like men's stuff, men's interest, which is funny because I always find stuff that I like in men's interest stores, like fountain pens. And I paid probably $22, and it came also with a little bottle of ink, which is really cool. And it came with a converter, which is really cool. And it's a good quality pen. The nib is a little broader than I usually like, and the pen itself is extremely heavy. I wish I could convey that over video, but it is just so weighty that I don't really like journaling with it very much. I don't get much use out of it. But for the money, it was still a really high quality pen, and it's one of those things that you want to have it in your jacket pocket all the time so you can look super classy. It's hard to see in this light, but it has a dark green marble pattern on the barrel, and it feels very classy. So, good little pen. I just don't use it much. Another one I don't use much is this little guy by, well, it says JHerpen, but you know it's French, so it's like JHerpen or something. Extremely short, compact pen that I actually can't put a converter in because it's so short. It doesn't have room for the plunger or the tail, so I'm stuck using cartridges in it. And I don't like the nib on this one very much. It writes pretty rough, even here when I'm using it on Tomo River paper, which is the smoothest paper in all of existence and the best paper for fountain pens. It still just feels like it's dragging. So not my favorite, but if you are looking for a true pocket size, like look at that. My hands aren't very big. It's a tiny, tiny pen. Then that's the one that you really want to go for. Also, I like the clear barrel. I think that's pretty neat. And I know that Noodlers also makes some pens that have clear barrels. I need to check those out. But that's my JHerpen. Now this, I'm not even sure it's technically a fountain pen. This is a platinum carbon ink pen. And this is an extra fine, and it's a Japanese extra fine. So it's really the finest nib known to man. And you can see how fine that is. The ink that comes with it is a special proprietary cartridge, and it is carbon ink, and it has carbon particles in it. And you can't put that in a regular fountain pen because it will clog. And I have a feeling that if you put regular fountain pen ink in a platinum pen, it would leak constantly. I think that's probably the difference between those things. But the carbon ink is waterproof and extremely durable. And this is actually meant to be like a document pen. I've been forgetting to crack these open. Sorry about that. I'll show you. There's that proprietary carbon ink cartridge. This is meant to be a document pen. It's actually, it looks like this because it is meant to go in those pen holders at cashier stations at a bank, and it just sits in there all the time, which is why the cap doesn't actually seat itself on the body. So keep that in mind. You can't actually put the cap on there and expect it to stay. But it's great because there's absolutely nothing that can make this ink move once you put it down. So I paid probably $15 for this one. Jane Davenport also sells it as the Epic pen on her website, but you can also find it's the Platinum Carbon is the name of it. You can find it in a few more places. I think I got this one from JHerpen, which is where I usually find things that I can't find anywhere else as far as pens go. So last but not least is my latest acquisition. This is a Lamy Safari. And I put off getting one of these for a long time because they're more expensive than I really want to spend on a fountain pen. They're $30 to $40 usually, depending on if you get them online versus in a fountain pen store. I had seen some in the fountain pen store that's 3 hours away from me that it poses a giant temptation every time I go to that city. But I just hadn't taken the leap yet because they do also have a proprietary cartridge. You can't put a standard size cartridge in a Lamy, and you can't put a Lamy cartridge in a different fountain pen. So that kind of turned me off, and I hadn't taken the leap. But I am fortunate enough to share office space with somebody who I think maybe likes fountain pens more than I do, which is weird. I don't know if you can wrap your head around that, but he actually lent me one of his spare Lamys, and it took me about 30 seconds of using it before I was online ordering one of my own. So once again, because I like fine nibs, I got the extra fine, and it is very fine, and the nib is pretty responsive, but it doesn't feel like it's going to bend back on itself. It's got a good quality to it, and it writes so buttery smooth over the Tomo River paper. It's just ridiculous. So that's the Lamy Safari. Now we're going to talk about the process of refilling. And what do you do after you buy a fountain pen and you use up the ink that came with it and you want to actually keep using it, because the whole point is that they're reusable and not disposable like all those other pens, right? Well, you would start with some cartridges. So there's manuscript cartridges, which come in a variety of colors and are usually pretty easy to find. There's Jane Davenport cartridges, which she has. This is the neutral set. She also has a bright set that has some greens and some purples in it. Those are pretty easy to find at Michael's as well. And then sometimes you'll luck out and you'll find special little tins. And I really bought this for the tin. I ended up not liking the ink very much. It's not the sort of gray that I like, but the tin is still super cute and I'm really happy with it. So one of these days I'm probably going to switch it out and use it for something else. But those are cartridges. What do you do when you don't want to be restrained by the colors of cartridges that are available, and when you want the world to be your fountain pen oyster, or when you don't want to be restrained by the fact that Lamy and Schaeffer have proprietary cartridges too? When you want to expand your horizons, that is when you get a converter. This is the kind that comes with the Jane Davenport pen. Now it's got the barrel or the reservoir. It has the plunger, which you can see moving back and forth in here. And then it has this tail. And you can buy these converters separately without the tail, but it's just a track for the to guide the plunger straight, basically. So it's kind of helpful, but if your pen, whatever pen you end up using, if it comes in a little shorter than this, then you might just want one without the tail so that your plunger can be part of the way in and it can still fit into the pen. So that's a consideration. But once you have one of these, you can start using things like this fountain pen, this regular black fountain pen ink that came with my $22-ish fountain pen. Or you can use things like diamine, ancient copper, which is a gorgeous rusty orange color that I am just a total sucker for. But this is a huge bottle. It takes up a lot of space. It's probably going to last me the rest of my life, and it's only one color. So how do you explore different inks without making a huge investment of both money and space? Well, Goulet Pens has you covered. They sell individual samples. These are all about 2 milliliters, sometimes more, sometimes less, I think. But they're enough to fill a pen 2 or 3 times. So you can really get a feel for something before you commit to buying a whole bottle. And there are a lot of colors out there that I really like in small doses, but I wouldn't necessarily buy a whole bottle of and use for the rest of my life. So this is a great opportunity to test those. And these range anywhere from $1 to $3 per sample. So it's super economical. Shipping is pretty low. And that's through gouletpens.com. And I have tried, as you can see, so many different inks that way. It's just ridiculous, and it's so much fun. And you can even paint with these. They're like liquid watercolors. You can just take a brush and dip it in instead of going through the process of putting it into your fountain pen. But if you do want to put it in your fountain pen, they make it super easy because the nib fits right inside these little bottles, and then you just fill it up. Most of these inks, most fountain pen inks are water soluble. So you put them down, and if you put anything over them, they're going to move, or they're going to smear and blur. Not a problem in everyday use, sometimes a problem in art. Sometimes, though, you can totally use that, like in this piece where I actually put the line work down and then brought in a water brush and pulled that out. So I then have the color spreading, but I still have line work in details there. So sometimes you want to use that, and sometimes you really don't. So if you're like me and you want to use both fountain pen and watercolor on the same page, you need to look for bulletproof ink. These are by Noodlers. Noodlers makes several bulletproof shades, and they're not only waterproof, they are bleach proof because they're also meant to be document ink. So somebody couldn't bleach a check that you write with Noodler's bulletproof ink, which is a fun piece of trivia. Not super useful for art purposes, but the important thing here is that once they're dry, they are waterproof. They don't move again. So one is Lexington Gray, which we're going to refill my Lamy with in a second. And then there is 54th Massachusetts, which is a dark blue-black that I really, really like. So I went ahead and invested in a full bottle for that because I love blue-black. I knew that I was going to like it, and it hasn't let me down at all. So if I'm doing watercolor and I lay down my pencil and then I want to have some thicker lines, I put down 54th Massachusetts from a fountain pen, and then I can put my watercolor over that, and I have nice blue-black outlines with my watercolor work. So that is the purpose there. Now, time to refill my Lamy, and I do have the proprietary converter in here. It is a twist action, so the plunger moves when you twist it. So before I can put more Lexington Gray in this pen, I have to twist the plunger all the way to the top. You can see it go up into a pen mechanism here. I got my Lamy about 5 days ago, actually, and it is already my everyday carry with my traveler's notebook. So now I have just poked the nib all the way to the bottom of this container, and they have a little pointed bottom in this bottle, which is just perfect for just gently resting the nib in there. And then I twist to fill it. Sometimes it doesn't work 100%, but the good thing is that the cartridge, the converter, is clear, so you can see when it's not working. I can see right now that I have this just about full of ink. I've got a couple bubbles in there, but it should be ready to write now. The best part of using the converter is that the pen is ready to write as soon as you're done filling it. If you use a cartridge, there is going to be air inside the fountain pen's mechanism, and it will take a few minutes for the ink to work through from the cartridge all the way to the nib. But when you fill a converter while it's attached to the nib, it's just immediately ready to write. So that's the Lexington Gray Noodler's Bulletproof ink, which is a very nice medium gray. It's a little bit cool, and it's just very unobtrusive over a watercolor background or under a watercolor background. And it's just really fun to write and draw with. Now, we're gonna clean a pen. And again, I am self-taught with this method. This is how I have worked out a way to do it. And if you are an ultimate fountain pen expert, I welcome your comments. I start by taking it apart. I always do this with a converter. Fortunately, I already have one attached. And I'm going to start by emptying it into my empty container just to catch any ink that might come out. I'm going to give it a couple squirts. You can hear that. There is definitely still ink inside the chamber, but we'll get to that. Then I take it over to my water. I dip and pull, and it will contaminate my water instantly. The ink will come out of the nib, even though I'm not moving the plunger, and there will be some sort of fountain pen backwash. But most of the water will stay clean. That will allow me to eventually get to a point where the water that I'm pulling into the reservoir, see that? That will eventually be clear after I do this enough times. I can already see it getting clearer. It's definitely not as dark as it was. The color I had in here was, I think it was Charles Dickens by Diatramentis, which is a very green, almost Payne's gray, almost a teal, actually. See, it's already much lighter than it was. It's almost clear. Jane Davenport also has a video out on filling the incredible pen. So make sure you watch that if you get one. But I am just transferring water from one container to the other until that is just about perfectly clean. Now I'm going to empty this one last time, and then I'm going to give it a few more pumps with the plunger, just dry, because there is still water inside the fountain pen's mechanism and inside the nib, and that's going to make my ink pale when it starts coming out again. So I want to get as much of that water out as possible. I don't want to sit here and let it dry for a day, which would be the best way to do that, but the plunger on the converter aids in that process and just lets me draw in air and squirt it back out. So it's pretty handy. Give it a few shakes and a few taps. Try to get out the last drops. I usually blot it on a paper towel, but like a good quality paper towel so I don't get paper towel fragments up my nib. And now I don't hear that squirting sound anymore, which is a really good sign. It suggests that the mechanism should be empty. It should be ready to fill. And for my refill, I am going to switch to another diatramentis color. This is frankincense, and as the name suggests, it is actually scented, which is something that I heard from Jane Davenport. Actually, ink makers used to do all the time, and they did it like almost like a trademark. They would have custom scented inks, and it kind of fell out of favor for a while, but her incredible inks, which are just general use inks, are also scented, and you can put those in fountain pens, and they're semi-waterproof. And then the diatramentis has a line of scented inks as well. So as someone who doesn't have much of a sense of smell, it's just a nice piece of trivia, but I think it's kind of cool. I like frankincense. So once again, I'm putting my nib all the way into the pointed bottom of the sample container, and I'm drawing the plunger up. And I didn't quite get as much ink as I really should have. I'm going to push it down and try again. You can always do this over again. There we go. We're full to the very top. It's good to the last drop of ink. Here's my filled cartridge. I'm going to put the body back on, and you can see back when this had Dickens in it, I labeled it with Jane Davenport's journal tape, which is matte. It's really nice tape, but I was putting them at the tail end here, and that doesn't let my cap seat very well, and the Jane Davenport tape also leaves behind a slight residue when you take it off. It's not quite like washi tape. So what I've started doing since then is taking narrow white washi tape, and I'll pull off a little over an inch-ish, and I will write the name directly on that. And I haven't had any problem with this smudging much, even though it is washi tape. I do blot it before I try to move it, get the excess ink off. But once it's blotted that much, even though this is water-soluble ink, it has not really moved around, which is really nice. So then I take that, and of course, because it's washi, it peels up really easily, and I've just been sticking them on the side of my cap so that I can actually see it when it is stored tip up, which is how you should store your fountain pens. If you store them tip down, you're going to lose all your ink. They're going to leak everywhere. So make sure you store them tip up, but this way I can actually see what's in there. So now I've got a pen full of frankincense. Figure it's about that season. And you can see this is darker than the Lexington Gray, and maybe even a little more cool and green. It's not quite as cool and green as the Charles Dickens, but I'm going to show you. I'll bring in a little bit of water so you can see that color. Definitely a medium cool gray. And also go over the Lexington, and you can see that's not moving at all. So big difference between my water-soluble ink and the Noodler's Bulletproof. That is about it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or any other topics you want me to cover about fountain pens, any tips, any problems you've had, please leave me a comment and let me know. And if you try any of this out, let me know what you enjoy and which inks you like and which pens you like. And thank you so much for watching.